"Don't take your pills, sir." The voice was small enough that Sterling Croft almost missed it entirely. He had been reaching into the second drawer of his desk, the one with the brass pull handle that his late wife had chosen when they furnished this office 12 years ago, when he heard it. His hand had already closed around the familiar orange prescription bottle before the words registered fully in his mind. He looked up. A girl was standing in the doorway of his office. She was maybe 10, maybe 11, small enough that the doorframe made her look smaller still. She was wearing a plain green sweatshirt with a faded logo across the chest, and her hair was pulled back in two tight braids that someone had put considerable care into that morning. She was not breathing hard. She was not fidgeting. She was looking at him the way you look at something you have been watching for a long time and have finally decided to speak to. Sterling had not heard his office door open. "Who are you?" he said. His voice came out more carefully than he intended. The girl said, "My name is Nadia. My dad works the cleaning crew downstairs. He brings me sometimes when there's no school and he can't find someone to watch me. I'm not supposed to bother anyone." She paused. Something moved across her face. Not fear exactly, but the thing that sits just next to fear in the chest of a child who is doing something that required her to be brave to do. "Someone was in your office this morning," she said. "While you were in your meeting, I saw him. He went into that drawer." She nodded toward the desk. "He had gloves on." Sterling Croft set the prescription bottle down on the desk without opening it. He was a man who had spent 40 years reading rooms. He had sat across from corporate boards, federal regulators, and one sitting senator during the worst week of the senator's professional life, and he had always been the person who did not react before he understood what he was reacting to. He looked at the girl and he looked at the orange bottle, and he thought about both of them for the length of 3 seconds before he spoke again. "Nadia," he said, "I need you to come inside and close the door." She did it without hesitating. She closed the door the way someone closes a door when they don't want to make a sound. Both hands, firm but slow, until the latch clicked softly. Then she stood with her back to it and waited. "Tell me what you saw," Sterling said. "Start from the beginning. Don't leave anything out." Nadia took one breath, then she told him. She had been in the supply closet on the 28th floor, one floor below, sitting on an overturned mop bucket, reading a library book she had brought in her backpack. Her father had told her to stay there and not wander, and for almost 2 hours she had done exactly that. Then she had gotten thirsty, and the supply closet had no water, and she had remembered that there was a small break room at the end of the 29th floor hallway with a vending machine and a sink. She had taken the service stairwell. When she came through the fire door on the 29th floor, she had nearly walked into a man in a charcoal suit standing by the water fountain. She stopped. He had not seen her. He was looking the other way, down the main corridor in the direction of the executive offices, and he was pulling on a pair of thin latex gloves. She knew what latex gloves looked like because her father wore them when he handled certain cleaning chemicals. The ones in the yellow bottles he kept on the highest shelf of the supply cart, so she couldn't reach them by accident. She had stood very still behind the fire door and watched through the narrow vertical window in the steel. The man walked down the corridor. He had a key card, but he did not swipe it at the main security panel the way everyone else did. He swiped it at the emergency override panel beside the fire exit, a panel she had not known existed, but that apparently did, because the lock on the executive office door clicked open. He had gone inside. She timed him on her watch. She wore a digital watch her father had given her for her birthday, the kind that also showed seconds. He had been inside for 4 minutes and 11 seconds. When he came out, the gloves were gone. He had rolled them off and put them in his jacket pocket before he even reached the door. He walked back the way he had come, past the water fountain, through the main lobby, and onto the elevator without looking back once. She had not gone to the break room. She had gone back down the service stairwell to the 28th floor, found her father's supply cart, and sat on the mop bucket again for almost 20 minutes trying to decide what to do. "Why didn't you tell your father?" Sterling asked. "I did," Nadia said. "He said maybe the man was supposed to be there. He said I shouldn't get involved in things that had nothing to do with us. He said the people on the 29th floor are important people, and I should go back to my book." She looked at Sterling directly when she said it. There was no resentment in her face, only a kind of quiet patience, as if she had expected this response from the world and had already decided it would not stop her. "But I kept thinking about the gloves," she said. "People wear gloves when they don't want to leave fingerprints. I read that in a detective book. and emergency override panels are on a separate circuit from the regular security system. There's no log. I looked that up on my phone. Sterling looked at the orange prescription bottle on his desk. It was his blood pressure medication. He took one every morning at 9 o'clock, the same time every day for 6 years, without fail. His cardiologist had told him that consistency was everything with this particular drug, that the time mattered as much as the dose. It was 8:53. "Nadia," Sterling said, "how did you get up here? Did you take the service stairs again?" "Yes, sir. I didn't want to use the main elevator because I thought he might still be in the building." Sterling looked at her for a moment. He looked at the bottle. He looked at the drawer it had come from. "I'm going to ask you to do something," he said. "I want you to sit in the chair by the window, the one with the blue cushion. Don't touch the phone if it rings. I'm going to make one call." Nadia walked to the chair and sat down on the edge of it, the careful way a child sits when she is not certain she is allowed to be somewhere. She folded her hands in her lap. She did not look afraid. She looked like someone who had made a decision and was now prepared to live inside it. Sterling picked up his desk phone and dialed a 4-digit extension from memory. The man who answered was named Vaughn. His full name was Vaughn Aldrich Teller, but no one at Crofton Associates had called him anything other than Vaughn in 7 years. He had been in Army counterintelligence before that. He asked very few questions and wasted no motion, which was exactly what Sterling had needed 7 years ago and needed more urgently now than ever before. "Vaughn," Sterling said, "I need you in my office. Come up the service stairwell. When you reach the 29th floor, knock 5 times. I'll let you in." There was a pause, the kind that a very competent person makes when they are already moving. 8 minutes, Vaughn said. Sterling sat with the prescription bottle and did not touch it. He looked at the girl in the chair by the window. She had taken a small paperback from her sweatshirt pocket and was reading it with the focused calm of someone for whom books were not a pastime, but a place to go when the world outside required patience. Sterling found himself thinking about the morning schedule, the 9:15 with the audit committee, the 10 o'clock with senior partners about the medical device acquisition. At 11, a call with their legal team in Washington about the Feldman matter, the quiet internal investigation that had been running for 11 weeks into a pattern of vendor payments that did not have clean explanations, an investigation that only 4 people in this firm knew existed. He thought about that number, 4. Himself, his general counsel, his outside auditor, and the firm's chief operating officer, Dalton Ferris, who had come to Sterling 12 years ago as a 31-year-old with a resume that was good but not exceptional, and a manner in meetings that Sterling had told his wife that evening was the most reassuringly honest thing he had encountered in a person in years. He had promoted Dalton 3 times in the first 4 years. He had brought him into the Feldman investigation because it could not be run without the COO's access to the firm's financial infrastructure. And he had trusted Dalton with that access the same way he had trusted him with everything else. He had not told Dalton that the outside auditor had, 2 weeks ago, found the first clean trail leading directly to an account Dalton controlled. He had planned to wait until the second trail was confirmed before saying anything, at all. He picked up his phone and dialed the outside auditor's number. "I need the second trail confirmed by end of day," he said in a voice he kept deliberately ordinary. "Move it to the front." Then he hung up. He looked at the orange bottle. He thought about how reliable he was about the 9 o'clock pill. He thought about who in this building knew that routine as well as he did, and the answer came back quickly. Everyone who had ever had a morning meeting in this office. Everyone who had been his COO for 12 years. 5 knocks on the door. Sterling stood, crossed the room, and let Vaughn in. Vaughn stepped inside without speaking, shut the door, scanned the room in one motion, and looked at Sterling. His eyes moved once to Nadia, who looked back at him without dropping her book, and then he looked at Sterling and waited. Sterling told him in 4 minutes. Vaughn listened the way he always listened, hands at his sides, face still, nothing wasted. When Sterling finished, Vaughn said, "The bottle stays where it is. I have a forensic contact. He can be here in 20 minutes. No one else enters this office." He paused, including Dalton Ferris. Sterling held his gaze. "He was in Singapore with me Monday and Tuesday. He flew back last night." "I know," Vaughn said. "That's why I said it." Vaughn went out through the service stairwell. Sterling sat back down. Nadia had lowered her book but not closed it, holding her page with one thumb. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Go ahead. Are you going to be okay?" The question was so direct that it took Sterling a moment to answer. Adults rarely asked it without some protective softening around it. She had asked it the way a child asks, without design. "I think so," he said, "because you came up here." She nodded once and went back to her book. Vaughn returned in 17 minutes with a man named Cates, who carried a small black case and worked in the efficient silence of someone who understood that whatever he found would need to hold up in a proceeding. He processed the prescription bottle carefully and spoke quietly to Vaughn near the window when he was done. Then Vaughn came to the desk and sat across from Sterling. "The bottle has been tampered with," Vaughn said. 11 of the remaining 14 pills have been replaced with an identical-looking compound. Cates can't confirm the specific substance here that requires the lab. But the initial chemical profile is not blood pressure medication. He paused. Taken in combination with your actual medication, which is still in your bloodstream from yesterday's dose, the interaction would most likely have presented as a cardiac event. Acute. Fast onset. Your medical history would have made it look entirely consistent. Sterling sat with that for a long moment. "How long for full analysis?" 6 hours. Cates is already moving." Vaughn opened his laptop on the corner of the desk and pulled up a security feed that Sterling had not known was being recorded. It was the service corridor on the 29th floor, captured from a camera mounted inside a smoke detector casing, one of Vaughn's additions 2 years ago, not listed on any schematic available to the firm's internal team. The timestamp read 7:41 a.m. The man in the charcoal suit appeared at 7:44. He was tall. His posture was the posture of someone who moved through things without hesitation. He used the emergency override panel exactly as Nadia had described. He was inside the office for 4 minutes and 8 seconds. When he turned briefly toward the corridor before entering, his face was visible for almost 3 full seconds. "Nadia," Sterling said quietly, "can you look at this?" She came and stood beside the desk and studied the screen. "That's him," she said. "He has a small mark here." She touched the left side of her own jaw, and his watch was on his left wrist. The face was light-colored, almost white. "That's him," Vaughn confirmed. "His name is Forrest Dunn. He spent 8 years in private contract security overseas. He came back 4 years ago. He's been available quietly for the right price. He is the kind of man you hire when you need something that cannot be traced back." Sterling looked at the frozen image on the screen. "And who hired him?" Vaughn reached into his jacket and withdrew a single folded sheet of paper. He placed it on the desk. "Dalton Ferris has a private holding account, registered in Delaware. It received 3 wire transfers in the past 14 weeks. The first came 4 days after you briefed him on the Feldman investigation. The transfers originate from a shell company that at the 3rd layer of its corporate structure is controlled by Harlan Ingram." Sterling looked up. Ingram. The vendor at the center of the Feldman investigation. The man whose fraudulent invoicing, if fully prosecuted, would result in criminal referrals for anyone who signed off on the payments. Dalton signed off on every one of them. "Yes," Vaughn said. "He did." Sterling opened the folded sheet. 3 numbers, transfer amounts, and 2 names. The numbers were significant enough to motivate a man who had been watching a quiet internal investigation close the distance between itself and his name for 11 weeks. He folded the sheet and placed it in the center of the desk. He had hired Dalton Ferris when Dalton was 31 and still uncertain of himself in the way that genuinely capable people sometimes are before the world confirms what they're worth. Sterling had told him on his first day that the firm was only as honest as the people who ran it, and that honesty was the one quality he would not negotiate on. Dalton had looked him in the eye and said he understood. Sterling had believed him completely for 12 years. He looked at the chair across from his desk, the one where Dalton had sat every Tuesday morning for those 12 years, close enough that the cushion showed a permanent impression from where Dalton rested his left elbow. Sterling looked at it for a moment and then looked away. Where is he right now? His office, 31st floor. He arrived at 7:15 this morning. He made 1 call at 7:40, 9 minutes before Dunn appeared on the 29th floor feed. The call lasted under a minute. It came from a prepaid number registered to no account. Sterling turned to the window. The Chicago skyline sat gray and steady under a low November sky. A barge was working its way south on the river below, slow and deliberate, the same way it moved on every other morning he had looked at it from this desk. "Call Detective Rosario," he said. "I want him here by 2 o'clock. I want him to have everything. The lab results, the feed, the wire transfer records, before he comes through the door. I want Dalton's arrest to happen in his office, with every document already in order." "Done," Vaughn said. He stood. He looked at Nadia. "What is your father's name?" "Reuben," she said. "Reuben Okafor." She spelled the last name without being asked. Thank you. I'm going to send someone to let him know you're safe and that Mr. Croft asked you to stay for a while. He won't be told the details, only that you're fine. Yes, sir, she said, but tell him I'm not in trouble. He worries. I'll make sure he knows that, Vaughn said, and left. Sterling looked at the empty chair again. He thought about 12 years of Tuesday mornings. He thought about a hotel bar in Seoul 4 years ago, after a deal that had taken 14 months to close, and about the speech Dalton had given at Sterling's 61st birthday dinner that had made Sterling's daughters cry in the good way. He thought about what kind of person could do both of those things and also do what Dalton had done. And he could not make the two versions of that man occupy the same space in his mind. He did not expect they ever would. Some things you simply carry. When Ruben Okafor arrived at the office 40 minutes later, escorted up the service stairwell, he was a lean man in his mid-40s with close-cropped hair, going gray at the edges, and the posture of someone who had spent years doing physical work and was not ashamed of it. He wore the building's maintenance uniform. His hands showed the years in it. He came into the office, looking first at his daughter with an expression that moved through alarm and relief in the space of a single breath. And then he looked at Sterling, and his face became something more careful and more uncertain. Sterling introduced himself and said, "Please sit down." Ruben sat on the edge of the chair across the desk. Sterling told him everything. He told him plainly, the same way he would have told a senior partner, not softening it, not simplifying it. He said what the tampered pills were, what the security footage showed, what the forensic analysis had found. He said that without his daughter's decision to come upstairs this morning, a very different conversation would be happening in a very different office before the day was out. Ruben listened without interrupting. When Sterling finished, Ruben looked at his daughter, who was still in the chair by the window. He did not say anything to her. He looked at her the way a parent looks at a child who has done something that surprises and exceeds them. Not just proud, but slightly awed, the way you are awed by something that grew out of you, but is already becoming something you cannot fully account for. Then he looked at Sterling. "I told her not to come up here," he said. "I know," Sterling said. "She told me. She should have listened to me." "Yes," Sterling said, "and I am very grateful that she didn't." Ruben was quiet for a long moment. The November light through the window had shifted, the cold brightening that is not warmth but is the nearest thing to it on a gray Chicago morning. "Mr. Croft," he said eventually, "we don't need anything from you. I want you to know that. She didn't come up here because she wanted something. She came because she thought it was right. I'm not going to let her think that doing right is something you do because somebody rewards you for it afterward." "I know that," Sterling said, "and I'm not offering a reward." He leaned forward slightly. "I'm asking permission to do something that is entirely about her. Your daughter is 11 years old, and she reasoned through a situation most adults in this building would have walked past without a second thought. She timed the man on her watch. She looked up how emergency override panels work on her phone. She sat on a mop bucket for 20 minutes, and then she made a decision to come up here anyway, because she decided that what she knew was worth more than her comfort." He paused. "I would like to fund her education. Whatever school she chooses, at whatever level she decides to pursue. I want it in a trust in her name that doesn't depend on any goodwill between you and me, so that whatever happens to either of us, it is hers regardless." Ruben looked at his daughter. Nadia was watching both of them with the same composed steadiness she had held all morning. She did not look eager. She did not look uncertain. She looked like someone waiting for the adults in the room to arrive at something reasonable. Ruben looked back at Sterling. "That's for her," he said finally. "Not for me. Only for her." A long pause. Then Ruben nodded once. It was a small nod, the kind that costs something to give. "Thank you," Sterling said. "Thank her," Ruben said quietly. "Not me." By 4:30 that afternoon, it was done. Dalton Farris was taken from his office on the 31st floor without scene or announcement. Sterling was told later that Dalton had looked up from his computer when the detective came and had simply closed the laptop. He had not spoken a word of protest. He had not asked for a lawyer or expressed surprise or looked toward the door. He had stood up, buttoned his jacket, and walked out. Forrest Dunn was found 2 hours later at a rental property outside the city. The prepaid phone in his jacket pocket matched the number that had called Dalton's office at 7:40 that morning. The charges were laid out 3 days later: conspiracy to commit murder, attempted homicide, obstruction of a financial investigation, wire fraud. The lab analysis entered into evidence confirmed that the 11 substitute pills contained a compound that, in the amount Sterling would have ingested with his morning dose, combined with the residual medication already in his bloodstream from the previous day, would have produced a cardiac event of sufficient severity to be fatal in a man of Sterling's age and cardiac history. The toxicologist stated for the record that the death would have presented as entirely natural, that no one, absent a targeted investigation, would have asked further questions. Sterling did not attend the arraignment. He watched the coverage from his office, and when it was over, he turned off the screen and sat in the quiet for a while. He thought about Dalton. He thought about 12 years and about the speech at the birthday dinner and about a version of a person who could do both of those things, and he could not resolve it. He did not expect he ever would. Some things you simply carry forward without resolution, because the alternative is to keep setting them down in the middle of rooms where you still have work to do. He started taking the stairs in the mornings, all 29 floors, twice a week. He told Vaughn it was for his heart. Vaughn did not comment on the timing. Ruben and Nadia stayed in a serviced apartment the firm maintained for out-of-town clients for 3 weeks, while Vaughn confirmed that no secondary exposure remained. By the end of the first week, Nadia had finished her library book and sent Sterling a handwritten note through his assistant asking if he had any recommendations. He sent back a list of 12 titles. She wrote back, in careful, unhurried handwriting on a card his assistant delivered without comment, that she had already read 3 of them and that number 7 on the list was the best one. Sterling framed the card. He set it on the windowsill where he could see it from his desk. On the last Sunday of November, he drove to the apartment to say goodbye before they went home. Ruben met him at the door. They sat at the small kitchen table and drank coffee that Ruben had made in a stovetop pot he had apparently brought from his own kitchen, because the apartment's machines produced something he described, without animosity, as dishwater. They talked for an hour. Not about the events of that Tuesday morning. Not about Dalton Farris or Forrest Dunn, or what the lab had found in the orange prescription bottle. They talked about where Ruben had come from, and about his wife, who had died when Nadia was 4, and about what it costs to raise a child alone on a building maintenance wage in a city that does not make it easy, and about the books Nadia read and the reason she had always read them. Not for school. Not because she was told, but because she had understood from very young that the world was wider than the one immediately around her, and that books were the fastest route into the rest of it. She gets that from her mother, Ruben said. He said it simply, without grief performing itself, though there was grief underneath. Her mother believed that the most dangerous thing in the world was a closed mind. She used to say that. He turned his coffee cup in both hands. I believe it too. I just never found the right words for it the way her mother did. Sterling looked at him. You found other words, he said. You told her that staying silent makes you smaller. She told me that. She told me it was you. Ruben was quiet for a moment. I said that to her once. I didn't think she was paying attention. She was paying attention, Sterling said. Nadia came to the kitchen doorway then, still in her pajamas, hair loose and uncombed, holding the 7th book from Sterling's list. She looked at both of them with the calm, clear attention she apparently brought to everything she turned it toward. Are you staying for breakfast? She asked Sterling. He looked at Ruben, who looked back with an expression that Sterling took to mean he was welcome, if he wanted to be. Yes, Sterling said, if that's all right. Dad cooks, Nadia said. I read the recipe out loud so he doesn't have to keep checking his phone. That sounds like a good system, Sterling said. It is, she said and went back to her book. There are patterns we mistake for coincidence and routines we mistake for safety. Sterling Croft had built his professional life on the belief that he could read a room, that he understood the architecture of trust and the many ways it could fail. He was not wrong about that. But he had been wrong about something smaller and more consequential. He had believed that the most important people in any given building were the ones whose names appeared on the organizational chart. He knew better now. Nadia Okafor had never been on any chart. Her father swept the floors of the 28th floor 5 nights a week and went home before the executives arrived. They had passed each other in lobbies and stairwells for 3 years without Sterling ever learning their names. He knew their names now. He said them both out loud on the drive home from the apartment that Sunday morning. Just to hear them take up space in the air the way names do when a person finally decides to hold on to them. Pay attention to the people you walk past without seeing. Learn the name of the person who cleans your building before you learn the name of the person across the conference table. And if a child ever stands in your doorway with steady eyes and tells you something doesn't seem right, set down whatever you're holding and listen. Because the most careful thinking in the room is not always coming from the most expensive chair. And sometimes the only thing standing between you and the last mistake you'll ever make is a girl in a green sweatshirt who timed a man on her birthday watch, looked up the answer on her phone, sat on a mop bucket for 20 minutes weighing the cost of being wrong against the cost of staying quiet, and decided that staying quiet was something she was not willing to do. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And wherever you are watching from, leave us a comment. We read everyone. Remember always to listen to the small voices around you. You never know which one is trying to save you.